The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
You know that I love lists, particularly historical lists. And sometimes I have bones to pick with those who put together these lists. And there is now a list out from the Associated Press to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the preseason All-American team. And there are some names here which are slam dunks. But the lack of attention to history rankles me once again. I will get to that shortly. DeMaurice Smith out pumping his book. Wait till you hear what he has to say about Jon Gruden. Whew. We'll get to that in just a bit. And there is some news coming out of Ashburn. A little bit of news. Nothing significant regarding Terry McLaurin as he remains a hold-in. They're back on the practice field today, and they've got their exhibition game coming up on Monday against the Cincinnati Bengals. If you didn't hear, the practices that were supposed to take place before they play the Ravens a week from tomorrow, those have been canceled. The Ravens said they couldn't work out the logistics for whatever that's worth, but we'll get to that. This is not exactly breaking news, but it's the latest from Ashburn regarding Terry McLaurin, and it was Kliff Kingsbury's chance to talk to the media today. Usually the coordinators talk once a week. They're scheduled to speak once a week during the regular season. That's Thursday, so I guess they're just keeping on a somewhat normal schedule, but today, Friday, Kingsbury talking to the media, and the question was about, of course, Terry McLaurin, and it wasn't, well, when do you think he's going to be back? It was more like when he gets back, and we're getting, pretty late in the game here, when he gets back, will there be enough time to reestablish chemistry with Jaden Daniels? Here's Kingsbury.
I mean, there hasn't been a ton of contact with him. He's been here, but he's been working with the trainers. So until he gets back on the grass, that's when we'll start building that back up.
At that point, what can you do at that point to make sure it doesn't take a long time?
Yeah, I think, that's one of those deals. It's just time on task, and luckily what they had last year to build a lot of rapport and chemistry, and Terry understands our system going into a year or two, so that should expedite the process. But to me, it's time on task together on the grass is really the only way that you can continue to build.
Time on task. And remember this, Terry McLaurin didn't go to minicamp and missed some of the offseason workouts. So realistically, the last chance that they really had to get their timing down was in May. We're in the middle of August now, and even if they work out a contract today, tomorrow, whatever, I don't think you're going to see him on the field in the exhibition season. It's certainly too late for him to play on Monday. And then in the finale against the Ravens, you're not going to see Jaden Daniels play in that game. And I don't think – maybe if McLaurin wants to go out for a series, maybe, but I don't think that's going to make any sense. And then on top of everything else, there's this news yesterday that the Ravens, who were supposed to be participating in a practice with the Commanders, it was supposed to have been a week ago yesterday. So on Thursday, they were supposed to come in from Baltimore, spend a day practicing, and then going through their own walkthroughs for the last exhibition game on Saturday. That was revealed during Dan Quinn's news conference that the Ravens had tweeted out that they had called it off, and this was Quinn's reaction.
Sometimes just, schedules don't sync up as it hits, and so I visited with Jon last night, and he's always choosing the best choices for the players. So every once in a while it just doesn't sync up, and so, yeah, we're bummed. We got a lot of respect for them, and we're looking forward to it, but we'll get to see them a couple days later after that, so it'll be good.
How does that impact playing time decisions for Monday night against the Bengals?
No, I separated those before we even thought about for Baltimore. We got a big crew that will get some reps in the game versus Cincinnati. The plan will be to have, some of the starters, getting some snaps. It'll still be customized, but it wasn't affected by the joint practice. I was looking forward to it just because we regard their team well. But like I said, sometimes it just, doesn't sync up, as it's going. So we're bummed about it, but like I said, always the best choices for the guys.
Quinn did not say which starters would play. I would imagine that Jaden Daniels is going to play at least a couple of series. Or maybe not. Who knows? I mean, the exhibition season is such a waste anyway. But I would think on Monday night that he's going to play a couple of series. But maybe they'll plow down on that a little bit more today or tomorrow. Next chance that they get to talk to Dan Quinn. As far as what happened this week, you've probably heard about the scrimmage that they had, the Burgundy versus Gold, and the team that was quarterbacked by Jaden Daniels was shut out, and the consensus seemed to be, well, without Noah Brown and without Terry McLaurin, he was kind of skittish out there. He didn't look very good. Quinn trying to put a positive spin on that.
I guess that's the silver lining in some things. When you see a practice that doesn't look quite as good, it maybe jumps out to you because they're pretty rare. And those are honestly good moments to have as well, as a competitor, as a player, and look in what was different, what was the same. So we visit a lot, he and I do, and I enjoy talking to him about different players and different matchups. And we were just having that discussion today, and we were talking like how much better, the unit is, where they're going and how they're doing it. And he said, man, think about how much better that is for the offense. So no surprise that his attitude was right on point about it, because he kind of relishes the challenge, to be honest with you. So when those moments come up and, he's going again the next one or the next day, he's pretty ready to get it on.
So that was pretty much the highlights of the news conference yesterday from Dan Quinn. Again, we don't know which starters will be on the field on Monday night against Cincinnati. I guess he's got another news conference coming up either today or tomorrow. So I would assume that they'll press him a little bit on whether Daniels plays or not. But that was pretty much it from yesterday. I mentioned this All-American team, the all-time All-American team put out by the Associated Press. They put their first one out 100 years ago. So they're celebrating it with the all-time team. And here are the qualifications. It has nothing to do with their professional careers, which when you hear the quarterback, you'll understand this. Qualified players must have been AP first-team All-Americans at least once in their careers. Well, I'd hope so. Professional accolades not considered, of course. A dozen AP college football writers participated in the voting effort and selected players across generations and eras to best represent the top All-Americans in their respective positions throughout the last century. As you might expect, Ohio State was tied for the most representation. They had 3 selections apiece on the first team and 1 on the second team. This surprises me. You know what the other team was? Pitt. Pitt had 3 players on the first team and 1 on the second team. I would have thought, Michigan, USC, Notre Dame. No, those are the 2 schools. Yeah, Ohio State, you understand. Pitt as tied with them. Okay. Here's what bothers me. Here's what bothers me quite a bit. And I'll get to these selections. This is 100 years. So you're going back to 1925, right? There are 2 players selected from the 20s, neither of whom I'd have heard of. And there's one glaring omission from the 20s, which I will get to. There are no players from the 1930s on this list. There is one from the 1940s, 2 from the 1950s, and 1 from the 1960s, 8 from the 70s. Okay, that's legitimate representation. But recognize this, that of the first, 50 years of this, 45 if you started in 1925, you only had 6? 6? Are you kidding me? And there is an unbelievable glaring omission from the 1920s, which I will get to here in a moment. But of that group from basically 1925 to 1980, only 14 selections. Are you kidding me? 28% from that period of time? And I know here's a problem. Of the people who voted on this, they were AP writers. Well, clearly they wouldn't be covering college football back in the 1950s. I'm not sure any of them covered it in the 60s. And if there are any that are left from the 70s, I would be surprised by that, as media organizations have shuffled out older people over the years. So a bunch of kids voting on this, I would imagine. Maybe there's some voters in their 50s, but this is the problem when you put together these all-time lists, that there is what we would call the error of recency. So let's go through this. The one big highlight locally, and I think this is well-deserved, and this is a player from the 70s, so I'll give him some more credit on this. Randy White is on the first-team defense as a defensive end. And again, they don't take into consideration pro careers. White is in the Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame. But as a college player, it's an amazing story. He was recruited out of a small area in Delaware as a fullback by Roy Lester, who was the coach at Maryland back in the late 60s and the early 70s, and didn't have any kind of success. And he was replaced by Jerry Claiborne, who boosted the program to become a perennial bowl team after that. But he was converted from fullback to defensive end, and the rest is history. I mean, every team ran away from his side, and he still made all the tackles. He was incredible in college, and I believe he was the second pick of the draft in 1975 behind Steve Bartkowski, who was a quarterback. Anyway, here we go. Let's go through this, and then I'll give you the most glaring omission. Tim Tebow is the quarterback. Obviously, they're not considering pro careers, but you'd have to give it to Tebow. He won a national championship. He won a Heisman Trophy. I don't think you can have a big argument there, but maybe you might throw in another player. John Elway never made a bowl game, but, those who saw him play in college with not as much as Tebow had around him in Florida. Again, Elway went to Stanford. I don't know. The running backs, first-team running backs, Barry Sanders, Herschel Walker. Tremendous. I saw them both play. Great, great running backs. I'll get to the running back position coming up. Randy Moss, wide receiver. And again, they don't take in pro career. But, yes, he wound up at Marshall. He originally signed with Florida State, I believe, and didn't play there because of a marijuana violation, went to Notre Dame briefly, or maybe it was vice versa. Anyway, he wound up at kind of his hometown school at Marshall, and he was great at that level. And then, of course, went on to become a Hall of Fame player in the pros. Larry Fitzgerald at Pittsburgh, tremendous player. No argument there. Brock Bowers just finished up at Georgia. He's the tight end. A lot of great tight ends coming out of college, but okay. Offensive line, Orlando Pace. I believe he was the number one pick of the draft when he came out of Ohio State. Bill Fralick at Pitt. In the 80s, blocking for Dan Marino, tremendous player. John Hanna, considered to be by many the greatest guard to ever play the game, played at Alabama in the 70s. Jim Parker, one of the few old-timers, played at Ohio State in the 50s, later went on to the Baltimore Colts and became a Hall of Famer there. Chuck Bednarik is the one player from the 40s who made this list. He made it as a center at Penn. Played there 1947 to 1948, had been a World War II veteran, became a Hall of Famer in the NFL, and the last player to play both ways. Johnny Rodgers is a kick returner. He had one of the most famous returns ever when he was playing at Nebraska against Oklahoma in 1971. And the kicker is Sebastian Janikowski from Florida State in the late 90s, tremendous kicker. All right, first-team defense. Yes, Hugh Green from Pitt. 78, 79, 80, one of the few from, a relative few from the 70s. Believe finished runner-up for the Heisman Trophy in 1980 to George Rogers. Randy White from Maryland, 1974 All-American. And Ndamukong Suh from Nebraska just announced his retirement. He's also on the defensive line. And then some recognition for somebody from the 20s. Bronco Nagurski makes it from the University of Minnesota, 1929. The one player, only one player on the first and second team from the 60s, that's Dick Butkus, who I believe played both ways at Illinois. May have been both a center and a linebacker there, but certainly one of the great linebackers of all time at Illinois, 1964. Derek Thomas from Alabama, 1988. Chris Spielman, Ohio State, 1986 to 87. Cornerbacks, Charles Woodson, one of the few defensive players ever to win a Heisman Trophy at Michigan in the late 90s, and Deion Sanders would be the other corner. I don't think you argue with that. Ronnie Lott, one of the great safeties of all time, USC, 1980. Ed Reed from the U from Miami in the early 2000s, and the punter is Torrey Taylor from Iowa in 2023. And then you get to the second-team offense. Kind of surprised that Vince Young is the quarterback, though I must say one of the greatest college performances I ever saw was in the Rose Bowl in 2006 when Texas upset USC. He was unbelievable in that game. That turned out to be his last college game. So if that's his last memory, okay, I'll live with that. Archie Griffin, only two-time Heisman Trophy winner from Ohio State at one running back spot. Tony Dorsett at Pitt, great as well. Again, I'll get back to the running backs. Wide receivers, Devontae Smith from Alabama in 2020. Desmond Howard won the Heisman at Michigan 1991. Those are the two wide receivers. Tight end Keith Jackson, not the announcer Keith Jackson, but he played for the Eagles for a long time, played at Oklahoma in the mid-'80s. Jonathan Ogden at offensive tackle, UCLA, local, went to St. Albans. Brad Buddy, USC, great player in the late 70s. Now here's where we get to the 20s. Again, two players from the 20s make this list. One of them's name is Jon Smith. Yes, Jon Smith is his name, something that you might write on a hotel room registry. But okay, Jon Smith, he was known as Little Clipper, and he played at Notre Dame in the 20s, later became a head coach at North Carolina State. Again, I could not have seen him, and nobody who voted on this could have seen him. Dave Remington, a big steroid eater, but okay. He was the center, picked from Nebraska, early 80s. Tim Brown won the Heisman Trophy, Notre Dame. He is a kick returner. And Martin Gramatica, Kansas State, is the kicker. Defense, Bubba Smith, Bruce Smith. Bruce Smith was a great player at Virginia Tech in the 80s. Bubba played in the 60s at Michigan State. Leroy Selman, defensive tackle. Warren Sapp, defensive tackle at Miami. Linebackers, Jerry Robinson, played at UCLA in the 70s with, by the way, Doc Walker. Brian Bosworth, Oklahoma in the 80s. Steroid guy, too. Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence Taylor, maybe the greatest defensive player ever to play football. North Carolina, 1980 is the other linebacker spot. Corners, Champ Bailey, sadly traded away from here, but great player at Georgia. And the Honey Badger, which is another interesting selection since he was kicked out of school at LSU for drugs. But prior to that was great. Benny Blades, one safety. The other safety, the second player from the 20s, from the 50s. How many did they have from the 50s? Only two. Two from the 50s. Al Broski, who had 29 interceptions in 27 games playing at the University of Illinois from 1950 to 1952, and Reggie Roby is the punter. Okay, again, error of recency. The four running backs, first team, Barry Sanders, Herschel Walker, first team. Archie Griffin, Tony Dorsett, second team. Are you kidding me? Red Grange was left off this list? You can only compare players to the era that they play in. You can't project how Red Grange would play in 2025. It doesn't work that way. Red Grange was to college football, and they were at the same time, what Babe Ruth was to baseball. Are you freaking kidding me? You put together an All-American list and you leave Red Grange off that list? That's insane. Would you put together an all-time baseball team and leave Babe Ruth off it? No, you would not. Red Grange had one of the greatest, if not the greatest day in college football when he scored 6 touchdowns in a game. Red Grange is not on this list, and you're putting together a first and second team? Are you kidding me? These running backs were great. Archie Griffin, that was 3 yards in a cloud of dust with Woody Hayes, 2-time Heisman Trophy winner. Okay, tough to leave him off. Tony Dorsett, when he left Pitt, was the all-time leading rusher. Great player. Barry Sanders, tremendous at Oklahoma State. And Herschel Walker, might be the greatest college running back I ever saw. I didn't see Red Grange other than some grainy film. But you just can't do this. You cannot do this. You can't put together 100 years of college football and leave Red Grange off. It just makes no sense. And there are many who believe that Red Grange saved the National Football League, that he went right from playing at Illinois to the Chicago Bears, and they sold out a game at the Polo Grounds against the Giants in a league that was teetering. Are you kidding me? How can you do that? How can you leave Red Grange off this list. So this is the problem that I have. Again, very poor representation from the first 60 years of this 100 list. Only 14 of 50 players, first and second team and specialists, and only 2 from the 20s, none from the 30s, 1 from the 40s, 2 from the 50s, 1 from the 60s. No. They played football then, and there were some players that stood out above the rest during that period of time. And again, it's unfair to leave them off because they didn't have the opportunity to play in the 90s, in the 2000s. It didn't happen for them. So very poor representation, I think, from an era that needs to be recognized. And, it's, again, you're going to, if you're going to look at Chuck Bednarik, you might say, well, he played at Penn. That's the Ivy League. Okay. Randy Moss is on this list. He played at Marshall. What they used to call 1AA. What is it, FCS now? I mean, this is how these lists are put together. And again, I always have problems with these because often these lists are put together by people in their 20s, and they have no sense of the history of the game. And if you're going to have the first and second team of the AP All-American teams for all time, and there's no Red Grange, you're out of your mind. I would be embarrassed to put that out there. If I were the sports editor of the Associated Press and I looked at this list, I would say, you're crazy. You're crazy. You want to start listing the all-time baseball players and you want to go through 50 of them and not get Babe Ruth? Yeah, now you might say, well, Babe Ruth was overweight and he wasn't a really good outfielder. And, in today's game, he might not be able to play. No. Red Grange is as important to college football as Babe Ruth is to baseball. Don't put out a list of the greatest college football players and leave Red Grange off it. Makes no sense. Coming up, DeMaurice Smith has a new book that he's pushing and says some very, very interesting things about the NFL, in particular, Jon Gruden. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Boy, if you want to talk about a mess, look at the NFL Players Association and what has gone on in the last 6 weeks or so. Pablo Torre, who used to do a podcast called Pablo Torre Finds Out. I don't think he's doing that anymore. He's doing some other kind of projects, but he did some really good reporting on this, and he came across a 61-page document where the NFL Players Association had filed a complaint against the owners saying there was collusion, that the Deshaun Watson deal, which was fully guaranteed, was something that the other owners wanted to avoid, and they went out of their way to get together and say, we're not going to give fully guaranteed deals, which is collusion. And the arbitrator looked at their case and said, well, I don't have enough to rule in your favor, but clearly there's evidence here of collusion. The Players Association never appealed this, and Torrey wanted to find out why. And it seems that J.C. Tretter, who is the president of the Players Association, had said some things about Russell Wilson and the fact that he signed a contract that wasn't fully guaranteed, and they didn't want this backstabbing to get out. So they just buried the whole thing. Well, that has led to a series of events, including J.C. Tretter resigning and Lloyd Howell, the executive director of the NFL Players Association. He also resigned after it was revealed that he had used union funds to go to strip clubs and that he had actually done some outside consulting work for a company that was working for the NFL. So he was conflict of interest. It was just a complete disaster. Well, the latest is Don Van Nana with this story in ESPN. He says the NFL Players Association put one of its top lawyers on paid administrative leave after multiple employees filed complaints with the union's Human Resources Department. Heather McPhee, as the Associate General Counsel for the NFL Players Association, has had that job since 2009, alleged her failure to follow supervisors' directions, as well as allegations of bullying colleagues and disrupting the union's work environment. So it's an S show going on there now. And looking in his rearview mirror at that is DeMaurice Smith, who was replaced only 2 years ago by Lloyd Howell, and now they're on to their third executive director in 3 years. And his new book called Turf Wars exposes some of the warts of both the NFL and for that matter, the NFL Players Association, and how he was unable to get them to stand up more. And I'll get to more on that in a minute. But this was his appearance with Major Garrett, who is a reporter with CBS. They did a feature on him over the weekend, and this is DeMaurice Smith describing some of the real problems that go on in the NFL, and a lot of it is, of course, related to money and power.
I think the most specious part of it is how the certain elements of the NFL are just manifestations of raw power. And it's raw power when you decide that Colin Kaepernick's not going to play anymore. And it's raw power when you decide, frankly, another journalist, but I know somebody when certain journalists started to speak out about concussions. Mm-hmm. And those, a lot of those people were put on the back burner. Bob Costas, I thought,
attempt to intimidate or silence.
And now you're
sideline, if you will.
And now you're seeing it now. I mean, this bullification of a power center that shuts down free speech, shuts down thought, shuts down just the idea that there's another way of perceiving or articulating things. I think that's the worst side of the NFL. And I saw it up close. On many occasions, I was the target of that.
Right.
But I also believed that, well, first of all, it's my job to stand up to this. And second, when we do stand up to it, you really do kind of pull away and reveal that maybe the emperor doesn't have the clothes that he or she thinks they have. And I think that's a great thing.
What is the Donald Trump effect on the NFL or vice versa?
Well, I think the effect on the NFL, we felt, 2017 forward, when he stands up and he calls players SOBs. I remember that vividly. Unfortunately, I'll never forget it. But, on a purely personal basis, I will never forget this instant understanding that for him and for the people around him, they thought it was yet another throwaway line of a crazy speech at a crazy time at another political rally that, frankly, is sometimes crazy. I remember distinctly thinking, this person has no idea that he has called a group of players mothers, the B word. Mm-hmm. And for some people, that is a throwaway line. For where I grew up, we would call it jonesing on each other, calling each other names, whatever. Man, once you cross the Rubicon of somebody's mother, that there's fisticuffs now.
It's a throwdown.
It's a throwdown. And I think his impact on the NFL was the way in which we saw the NFL respond to it. And literally, I don't know of another time in the NFL's history where there was such a unified belief of defiance
among the players
than that.
Right.
And for a union guy who's always looking for something to bring the players together,
right, to lock arms.
I wish, there were dozens of times I wish they would do it on a picket line, but you can dream.
Right.
But to have a group of people across the league respond to that in a way that I thought was not only positive, I thought it was direct, I thought it was timely, but most importantly, I thought that the players were thoughtful. And yes, some piped off in the media about X, Y, and Z. But what I loved the most was most everybody came back to a reverential moment and knelt.
That's DeMaurice Smith, part one, as he promotes his book Turf Wars on CBS with Major Garrett. This is part two, and I could not agree more with what he says about draft night. And his overall point is that NFL players should not be thankful to have this job in the NFL. They have earned that job. And here's how he makes his point on that.
You write in the book about being portrayed internally and externally by your rivals within the league as the angry black man biting the hand that fed him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And by implication, the players you represented, many of whom are African American.
Sure.
Biting the hand that so generously feeds them.
You should be thankful.
Walk me through all that.
I think that there is this pervasive riptide right beneath the surface of football where the owners believe that this is theirs, this is their country club. I mean, the reality is you could be the most wealthy person in the world, but you can't own an NFL team, right? You get invited in. And I saw it even...
Donald Trump figured that out.
Well, he figured out the hard way.
Yeah, he tried to get in.
And you see it, I saw it most starkly with players who were entering the draft, because we would have them for a couple of days before that Thursday night draft. And I would always talk to them and, welcome them to the National Football League, try to make them understand that this is a business. But the one thing that always roiled me a little bit with them was, D, I'm just thankful to be here. And I'm just thankful. And, they come out on stage and they hug Roger like he's a daddy. And that just drove me absolutely insane, because it is okay to be happy for the moment. It is completely unacceptable for you to believe that he's given you something. You're only there because you're the top, whatever it is, 140 players in the world. Right. You're only there because after high school and college, where most of your college rosters were 120 people on the roster, you might have been, unless it's Alabama, you might be one of 3 players from your team that gets to walk across that stage. So this idea you've earned it. And this idea that, it's welcome to the NFL family, I would tell them you are not in the family because you are not in the will. So go up on stage, shake the man's hand, thank you very much, and go play football. But you can't have this opportunity that the owners have given you something, or the owners should be, you should be thanking them.
Because time and time again, rostered players learn in the course of their career, whether it's a year, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 9 years, 12 years, they're expendable.
100%. I mean, we're in training camp now. We're in the preseason. There's 130 guys at camp now. The roster you'll carry 53 plus some other people. Half the people are leaving. And so this idea that somehow Mike Brown is giving you something, when Mike Brown sits down and gives a press conference like he did a couple of weeks ago and says, well, I'm not going to pay a guy a guaranteed contract because I never know, that guy could be sitting in jail one day. Man, we went all the way to jail? I mean, can't we just pump the brakes along the way? I mean, you literally said that one of the reasons you didn't want to pay a guaranteed contract because this guy might end up in jail. He's never been in trouble. He's made it through college. He's one of the best players talent-wise. He's asking for a contract that is consistent with other people who've gotten contracts both presently and in the past. And your objection to that is that you don't want to give it to him because you don't know he might end up in jail. That is a person who believes that every player in the National Football League should be thankful. And that biting the hand that feeds you is both class-based, but you would be on a fool's errand to believe that it's not also based in race.
Absolutely. And it is disgusting to me. I could not agree more with DeMaurice Smith about the bro hugs with the commissioner during the draft. That is ridiculous. And you may remember, it's been 15 years now, but when Trent Williams was drafted by the Redskins out of Oklahoma in 2010, I believe it was the first draft pick that the Mike Shanahan era made, and he asked to be called Trent Silverback Williams. Yeah, that's apparently a nickname that he embraced. A white commissioner saying those words, using that term for an African-American player, and then the bro hug that followed. No, look, these guys, he's right. They've earned that spot, and they have been drafted in the NFL. It's not like they selected the teams that they want to play for. I 100% agree with that. And I think that if I were a player, and I know it's tradition and I know it's all part of the whole, draft night thing, but I would say, no, I'm just going to shake the commissioner's hand. I'm gonna be welcome to my new job by the commissioner of the league, and that's it. I'm not going to hug him because he may have to discipline me down the road or discipline other players that I don't agree with. 100% on that. Last thing, and this is the most woo. Not that it should be a surprise, but that Jon Gruden just actually won his last round with the NFL, and there could be discovery, there could be all kinds of other things. But the league he had sued the league in a civil suit, saying that they had leaked the emails that forced him to resign. Now, these were horrible emails. They were racist. They were misogynistic. They were terrible. They were with Bruce Allen, who we haven't heard a word from since, and Jon Gruden, who had to resign as coach of the Raiders. This is DeMaurice Smith, who was part of one of these emails, a very racist part of what Jon Gruden said in his exchange with Bruce Allen. And here's Smith giving you what he thinks of one Jon Gruden.
I think somebody like Jon is classless. And I never had a cross word to Jon. I mean, we would have met each other occasionally, but, this sort of gratuitous comfort level of racism, I just find abhorrent. I think that...
expressed in emails that were released.
And literally there was one person on that email thread that I considered a friend. Somebody who I saw every week at NFL games, the local NFL games. And the casual comfort of the racism, and in some cases, at the Raiders facility, how he made, certain players feel about sexual orientation. I just find that to be so classless in a NFL ecosystem where, man, everybody has a tough job, right? And we meet each other, on this proverbial and real playing field, coming from different backgrounds and coming from different ways of life, and we're all trying to get our job done. And this sort of gratuitous racist trope, to me, was, come on, man. I mean, I would never do something like that to you. I would just never do it. And I found the whole, I talk about the voicemail that he left me. Hey, it's just terrible what people are saying out there. Well, that's not an apology. That's a, I hope that you will give me cover call. No.
Do you want me, or do you want to tell the audience what was in the email?
Well, sure. I'll tell you what was in the email. He wrote in the email that DUMB Morris has lips the size of a Michelin tire. I mean, his fascination with my lips is fantastic. At the same time, I found again, I keep coming back to the word casual, this casual willingness to reduce someone to something that is much less their essence is ridiculous. I just found it to be so offensive that, look, Major, is it the first time that someone's called me, either the N-word or something else racist or something else to my face? No, it's not. And there is a certain callousness to it that even when I read it, it was like, and today's Tuesday. It was the casual willingness to be out loud about it, right? I'm under no illusions. I don't spend a lot of time with the owners at the dinner table. I know that's going to come as a shock. Mm-hmm. But, I had one owner call me uppity at a meeting. So would I be terribly surprised if in their own cloistered world that they probably aren't saying, that D. Smith guy, man, that's a great, handsome dude. Probably not. But when you see someone who's so willing to be casual about it in an email to a group of other people, that tells me everything I need to know about you.
That's DeMaurice Smith pumping his new book, Turf Wars, on CBS over the weekend. We'll see where the lawsuit goes with Jon Gruden, but I can't understand how someone who would put out an email like that could possibly coach again in the NFL or even in college. I mean, he's saying he'd love to get an SEC job, and maybe he will, because people forgive a lot of things. But if I'm a player, particularly an African-American player, and I see that my coach has referred to another African-American as having lips as big as Michelin tires, I might have some issues with that. But that's only part of the book. It's called Turf Wars, again, from DeMaurice Smith. Coming up in the next hour, Johnny Manziel with regrets, and Gary Vitti, former trainer for the Lakers, explains why we've had a rash of injuries lately. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Isn't it amazing the number of NBA stars who have suffered torn Achilles in recent years? And just anecdotally, the number of injuries that we see these days, you kind of scratch your head and you go, why is that? Well, I got some real insight on that. Gary Vitti, who was the head trainer for the Los Angeles Lakers for 32 years, was on a podcast the other day and laid it out pretty well. Explained why that happened. If you're into some of the intricacies of medical and training research, you want to hear that. Johnny Manziel also showing up yesterday on the Rich Eisen Show with some of what you heard before, but there's some new details that come out. This is a guy who had it all, Heisman Trophy winner, first one to win it as a freshman, goes on to the NFL after 2 years and famously flames out for a variety of reasons in an era where the running quarterback is celebrated. If he'd kept his head on straight, he might have become an excellent NFL quarterback. Look at Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield came into the NFL being compared to Johnny Manziel, and he goes, ho, 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 that's not me. That's not me. And, yeah, he hit some bumps in the road. He also went to Cleveland. That's why, of course, the comparisons were maybe a little bit apt at the time, but that's the proper grammar. Is that proper grammar? A little bit apt, or were apt at the time. He hit some bumps. He got cut. He went to the Rams, but he's resuscitated himself and has become a top-flight quarterback with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That never happened for Johnny Manziel. And of course, he's got regrets about that, but he also paved the way for the NIL. He was doing what really the NIL was supposed to be all about. He wasn't supposed to be doing it at the time, but he was making money signing autographs. And you'll get his take on what he thinks about what's going on now. By the way, this is going to be very interesting today at 1:00. They're going to have a news conference to talk about what they've uncovered at the University of Michigan. These could be some, you say sanctions. I can't imagine they're going to keep Michigan off national TV. I can't imagine that they're going to have a bowl ban for Michigan, but they might. And also they're talking about, and I've seen some speculation this could happen, that they could rescind the national championship that they won 2 years ago. I don't, that's happened before. That's Louisville's basketball championship from, I believe, 2013 was taken away. But I can't imagine that that's going to be a part of this sanction. Even if it is, it's not like Michigan didn't win the national title. But the fact that they're holding this news conference at 1:00 on a Friday afternoon, to me, signals a news dump, at least to me. So stay tuned for that. Meantime, Johnny Manziel looking back on a career that didn't work out in the NFL, certainly did in college, and was doing what the NIL was intended to be for, that he was, going out and signing autographs for money, which he wasn't supposed to be doing. And in fact, when they found out that there might have been something going on, he was suspended for half of a game. That's how that was handled. Now, of course, he could sign as many autographs as he wants, and given the sensation that he was at that period of time, what was it, 10 12 years ago, he'd have made oodles of money in playing college football and probably would have stayed more than 2 years. But this is how he looks at what the NIL is now versus what he was doing when he wasn't supposed to be doing it when he was playing.
Even though it is a little bit skewed and a little bit out of whack, it is in the players' favor right now. And schools are having to adjust, and conferences and everything that's going on. It is a little wacky. But at the end of the day, to have kids that come through your school that move the needle, that bring in a ton of value and money and everything that comes along with it, they deserve to be compensated. So the thing that's kind of really tough is, like, for me, during our time, we couldn't just hop in a transfer portal and end up somewhere in the spring. We couldn't just bounce and go somewhere else or get an offer for somebody. It was a full year you have to sit out. So the opportunity that these kids are getting is, amazing. But also something that it's doing is, if you're a high school recruit, a 2-star, a 3-star, there are so many people in the transfer portal that there's not as many guys getting recruited out of high school because, why wouldn't you go get somebody from the transfer portal who's already been in the swing of things and knows how to handle themselves and go to class? Like, it's a lot more difficult teaching a high school kid that than somebody who's already been in another program.
Do you feel like the NFL or college can better prepare kids going into the NFL, or do you feel like it's better now than it was back in your day, or do you feel like there's still some steps that need to be taken to get a collegiate player ready for the NFL and what it brings?
I think it comes down to it's school dependent, right? Like, I think it comes down to the effort that the athletic departments are putting into making sure guys know about finances. Like, we would go into a rookie symposium and learn about, hey, you make $1 million, you're with your agent and your taxes and everything, you're really going to see X amount. Now, you can't have kids in college that are making $1 million a year and not pay their taxes and have the IRS coming after them and everything. So you would hope, an athletic department is sitting these kids down and really showing them that, if you make $100,000, you don't get $100,000. There's other things that come along with it. And, for them, just trying to teach them and educate them, it should be better, even though it is really hard to do that for 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids.
I mean, I don't know if the kids today are putting their $100,000 underneath their beds like you used to do when you would do autograph signings and stuff like that. Do you think that winning the Heisman as a freshman changed your life and changed your career? And if you didn't win the Heisman, like say Manti Te'o won, do you think that would have changed your career and your trajectory?
I think 100% it would have. I think that trophy and breaking down that barrier of being the first freshman to win the Heisman, changed my life forever. Something that throughout the history was really taboo at one point in time, that a freshman couldn't win it. And to finally, knock that barrier down and then see the next year Jameis come in and win it as a redshirt freshman as well, it really just changed the game for that fraternity and for that award. And, it changed my life forever. I'm forever, able to go to autograph signings or go to the award show in December and, sign a Heisman helmet along with the rest of the legends there. And it's, it is the greatest thing that has ever happened to me in my life, and something for me that I always dreamt about and got a chance to actually live a dream.
Talk to me about the popularity of Johnny Manziel, Money Manziel, Johnny Football. I mean, at your pro day, like, you had a former president, like George Bush and Barbara Bush were at your pro day. I mean, what was that like? Well, I mean, you were hanging out with Drake, LeBron, like all these amazing people, and you're still in college and still going to school. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable going through the pro day and being probably 10 minutes into the workout, and then you see the garage door kind of lift on the other end of the stadium, and you see President Bush on his golf cart just driving through, not a care in the world. I got to go sit down with him the night before and have a really cool dinner and talk and sit and just, being from Texas.
Wait, what did you talk about with George Bush?
I got to bring my mom and my dad and stuff. I think we just, we talked a lot about just Texas. We talked about what a great state it is, about Aggie football, about life. I think, It's a memory that me and my family, have framed in our house forever. I think it meant a lot to us at that time and was really, really surreal, when you're in college and they're like, hey, this is going to happen. And I was like, wow, I get to bring my mom, my dad, my sister and do this and have this whole experience. Like, come on, amazing.
That's Johnny Manziel on the Rich Eisen Show, hosted by yesterday The Miz, wrestling star, not familiar with, though he did pretty good job asking those questions, and they segged into what everybody asked Johnny Manziel about, what they've done documentaries about, the flameout. And this is a guy who really came out of nowhere. He played high school football in a small town outside of San Antonio, goes to Texas A&M. He's a red shirt there. He got himself into a little bit of trouble, something at a bar, but was eligible to play his sophomore year or his second year, I should say, redshirt freshman year. And he won the starting job, and boom, he was a sensation. And maybe it was too much too soon. He certainly didn't handle it very well off the field. But as you'll hear here, unlike Jaden Daniels, who was a tape nerd going back to when he was at LSU and maybe even before that at Arizona State, Johnny wasn't putting in the time in the classroom, and that ultimately cost him. Here's Manziel with The Miz on how it all went wrong after a sensational beginning.
I mean, when I went to college, I just wanted to get on the field and play college football. And then you look up 12 months later and you're on a stage in New York and you win a Heisman, and then you go back for a second season and you play better than you did the year before. And it's like, wow, I didn't come into this thinking that the NFL was actually going to be a reality. And then, you turn your papers in later in the year and you get a first, second round grade coming back. So it's like, wow, I really have the opportunity to be able to do it. And then when Cleveland happened, I didn't know anything about Cleveland. I knew going into the draft that they had 2 picks. So statistically, a team having 2 picks, there's a chance that they need a quarterback. There's a chance that I'm going to end up here. And then when I went to Berea for the first time the next day after the draft, I got to meet Ray Farmer and Jimmy Haslam and Mike Pettin and stuff, and just really taking a look at the roster at the time. I felt a lot of confidence with the pieces that we had, that I would be able to go in and be able to be a good fit for the organization. And ultimately, that wasn't the case.
When did you realize that the NFL was different than college? Because obviously, I imagine, I don't know this because I'm not you, and I imagine you'll parlay the information to us, but you're going in, you're dominating college. Like, no one can touch you. You're just tremendous. You're polarizing. Everyone wants a piece of Money Manziel. And then you go to the Cleveland Browns and you're like, I imagine if I'm you, I would probably be like, yeah, I'm going to do the same exact thing in college. And then you get to the NFL and you're like, wait, it's a job. It's not just playing on a football field anymore. When was that realization for you?
I think probably through the first training camp, as we got out there and they started introducing some defenses. The great thing about Texas A&M and Kliff Kingsbury's offense and the offense that we ran there, it was more predicated on speed, fast, getting defenses uncomfortable. But I wouldn't say we were super dialed into the X's and O's of the game, right? Maybe you're looking at 1 high, 2 high, or if a linebacker's tucked in the box to make a switch and throw a bubble and get the ball on the perimeter and play fast. When you get to the NFL and you're really starting to learn defenses, I felt overwhelmed. I felt swamped. Like I didn't learn enough that I needed to in college to be prepared for the NFL. And I remember being in practice, and it was probably maybe 5 days into training camp, and the defense started putting in an 8 DB package where there's 8 defensive backs walking around everywhere, and there's only 3 down linemen. You can't tell who's a down lineman or who to block, and there's just little guys all over the field. And I just remember walking off the practice field that day being like, that sucked. That was the day that was I got absolutely put in a blender, and just this was where you're like, this is what they do, right? You're going to see 3 down sets, 4 down sets. You're going to have guys walking around. It's not always going to be cut and dry and 4 down, 3 linebackers and everything looking perfect like it did a lot in college.
Do you have any regrets?
I sit here today with like just a lot of regret with how I handled a lot of things. I think I took a lot of my like similar attitude and like antics with me. I think I got really comfortable in being in a position my first year there of being the backup and really not having a lot of responsibilities. I think I never truly embraced Cleveland. I think I went into it with a negative mindset from the get-go and never really fully put my heart around it and gave it a chance. Um, Being in Texas my whole life and then going there was just a little bit of a shell shock for me. And, look, a lot of people throughout that time supported me, bought jerseys, the city embraced me, they loved me. There was a lot of hope that I was going to be able to go there and make a difference for a franchise that's been longing for that, right? But my effort and my determination and time that I could have put into the quarterback position is something that for the rest of my life will always haunt me, that I had the ability to do more and I didn't because my head and my mind and things were in other places that weren't focused on what I was truly, truly gifted at.
Yeah, he spent too much time in the club, and he needed to spend time in the tape room. And this isn't apples to apples, but there's another flame-out story that you may remember. It goes back quite a ways. Todd Marinovich, the son of Marv Marinovich, who was a star player at USC, played briefly with the Raiders, and decided that he was going to raise his son to be a star quarterback who would play in the NFL. That was the goal. And if you read the story, I mean, it's just awful parenting. He had him throwing the football in the crib, and then as he was growing up, when he went to kids' birthday parties, he wasn't allowed to eat cake. Totally sheltered life. I mean, completely. It was all the laboratory experiment to make him into a great quarterback, and he was a great quarterback in high school and was recruited to play at USC and became a starter there in his freshman year. However, it was his first time out of the bubble, the Marv Marinovich bubble at USC, and what do you know, got into trouble with drugs at USC, played quarterback there for 3 years. Al Davis couldn't resist, drafted him with the Raiders, and he played there and started, I think he even started a playoff game. But if you look at the story, it has a very bad ending with Todd Marinovich getting involved in some very hard drugs, including heroin. I don't know what his situation is now. I read a story some years ago where he and his dad kind of reconciled and things were a lot better. But one of the things that Todd Marinovich said was the goal was always to just get to the NFL. It wasn't necessarily to become a great NFL player. It was to get to the NFL. And once he had done that, it was like they were at the end of this wild journey, which included this, sheltered environment that he grew up in. Now, not quite the same with Johnny Manziel, but what he said was, hey, he goes to college just, hoping that he can get to play college football. And then 12 months later, he's the Heisman Trophy winner. And then he finds out he can be a first-round draft pick. And, maybe too much too soon, and he didn't handle it well, and he, did do things behind the scenes that he wasn't supposed to be doing, like signing autographs for money and collecting the money in cash and keeping it under his bed in his room and, all those things. And then, the fact, as he said, that he does regret that he didn't do what Jaden Daniels does religiously, get up in the morning, watch tape, don't go to the club, lives with his mom. If Johnny Manziel would have done all those things, who knows? It's another what-if story. All right, that's enough for me this week. I'll be back next week. Got an exhibition game next Monday. Bram is coming up next, and I will see you back here on Monday morning at 9 a.m.